If you knew who I was 10 years ago, you would never again doubt your ability to build that chopper. So today I'm going to do something that I have never done on this channel before. I'm going to tell you my story and all the embarrassing twists and turns that it took. Because it took me 10 years to fully learn the 5 lessons I'm going to show you so that my failures don't become your failures. I'm Grease, you're watching Grease's Garage, and I'm going to help you skip the struggle. Our first lesson today starts back in 2014. At this point in my story, I had never ridden a motorcycle in my life. I had no tools whatsoever, not even a single wrench. I had no garage. None of my family rode motorcycles or had any interest in bikes whatsoever. And my only friend who did was still living back in the preppy kingdom of Connecticut where I grew up, while I was living here in Boston, about 100 miles away. I was totally clueless mechanically. When my Honda Civic got a flat tire in the middle of Boston, I had to make a phone call to ask someone how to change the tire on the side of the road. It was bad. And if you haven't unsubscribed off of that story already, just stick around because it gets worse. But I knew I wanted a motorcycle and I was ready to learn. So I took the license exam and I passed the test. So immediately after that, I had my buddy drive with me all the way up to Concord, New Hampshire, where I bought my very first motorcycle, a Suzuki Intruder 800cc cruiser, if you want to call it a cruiser. And so my first time on the road on a motorcycle, I got on that bike in Concord, New Hampshire and rode that thing all the way back down to Boston on the highway. Fast forward a few months to a normal Tuesday morning as I'm heading to work, and thanks to a lack of diagnostic know-how for some issues I was having on the bike at that time, I was taking that thing down the highway to work when I hear bang and then a bunch of grinding as the internals of that motor turned into a metal smoothie. Now, I managed to keep the bike upright, but that is the unceremonious end to my very first motorcycle. But I wasn't going to let it keep me off 2 wheels. Knowing that I would want a little more power the next time around, I then picked up a Yamaha Roadstar 1600cc, the big boy motor. That's bigger than this 1340 Evo sitting behind me right now. And I loved this motorcycle, but I knew nothing about how to work on it. So when the suspension broke while I was riding with my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife of 7 years, I was at the mercy of a local shop. And this shop would barely give me the time of day. They took the bike, and every time I called to check on the status of the bike or to figure out what the repairs were going to cost, all I got was the runaround, and I could tell I was the last thing on their priority list. So when it was finally time to pick that bike up, I was handed a bill for triple the price that we agreed upon, and I was told that if I didn't want to pick it up, they would just sell the bike and I could move on with my life. Which brings us to our first lesson in a very important turning point in my story. You are the one who is responsible for your own success. I had gone into motorcycling as a casual rider. I was sort of treating my bikes the way that I treated my cars. I will do the riding and the enjoying, and the shop will do the fixing. This mentality is one for either the financially blessed or those who are just too scared to do something themselves. And as far as I was concerned, I was neither of those things. So I made a choice right then and there that I was going to be responsible for the functional condition of my motorcycles. So I urge you, do not surrender that freedom and that joy at the shop counter. A whole new life is waiting for you on the other side. Have you ever gone down into your garage to do a quick 5-minute job, and 2 hours later you're about 3 mistakes deep and you still haven't even started working on the thing you went down there for? I wouldn't know anything about that. At this point in my story, the year is 2017, and I'm now living in Haverhill, Massachusetts. And my Yamaha Roadstar has more stripped out metric Allen bolts than it has unstripped ones. Now, why did Yamaha have to use such cheap fasteners on this bike? I would ask myself as I would paw through my toolkit in the parking lot of my apartment building in late October. And speaking of this parking lot, it features very prominently in today's story, and that's actually what you're seeing in this video right here. I have a lot of history in this parking lot. And it's actually a very sacred place in this story. It's where I would go to do all of my poorly planned maintenance, to do my first carb rebuild. This is the place where I first ditched my front brake because it was rubbing and I didn't know how to fix it, and I didn't have enough cash on hand to pay a shop to help me with it. I'll say it again because it bears repeating. I have a lot of history in this parking lot. And I want you to know that if you are now where I once was when I called this parking lot my garage and my shop, working out in the cold or in the blazing heat of a hot summer day, know that I have been there. I know what it feels like, and I know that struggle, but trust me, it's not forever. It was in this parking lot and at my lowest point that I would learn that it wasn't cheap fasteners that were causing me to spend more hours sitting on this asphalt than I cared to. It was my cheap tools. My $24 100-piece Harbor Freight toolkit seemed like a great deal to a younger me on a shoestring budget with 2 kids to take care of, and no other tools to my name. But in the end, what it truly did was cause more heartache than the sticker shock of a 9-piece Snap-on set that would have let me remove those bolts properly the first time. Which brings us to lesson number 2. Invest in yourself. Some of us, myself included, we lose years of our lives and probably half of our sanity fighting against this lesson and insisting that it's not true. Now, truthfully, I wouldn't really learn this lesson until long after this parking lot right here was just a blur in my rearview mirror. But that's part of why Grease's Garage is so important to me. These lessons took me over 10 years to fully learn, but they don't need to take you 10 years. And now maybe you do trust me, and you're smarter than I was back then in the parking lot. But what good are those tools in your hands if you don't have the knowledge on how to use them? Which takes us to our next story. When I first got into motorcycles, I was all alone. I didn't know anybody else who rode or have anyone that could teach me how to fix them. But I had this idea that anyone who's been riding motorcycles for a long time must know how to work on bikes. And it was this idea, coupled with the fact that I had left my home state and lost my home friend group, that led me into the MC world to find a mentor who could show me how to work on my bikes. Now, to make a long story short, this was a 4-year experience in my life that took me to states that I would have never otherwise been to, showed me parts of the country I would never have seen without it, and introduced me to some very key people that would have a major impact on my story. Don't go anywhere because you're going to be hearing more about these people later. But when you are into choppers, you learn pretty quickly that choppers and motorcycles are really not the same thing. And while I thought that my love for choppers would draw me deeper into that MC world, it ended up making me an outsider, an annoyance to the group, many of whom just needed a motorcycle to take them from point A to point B as fast as they could possibly go. Now, it's important to remember that this isn't their fault. To go back to our first story, it's me that's responsible for my own success. So after 4 years in that world, I said goodbye to that part of my life, but I took with me 2 key friends, which leads us into lesson number 3, finding the right community. Now, while I was building a chopper during those MC years, the truth is I never really flourished in my chopper building career until I started meeting and spending time with other chopper builders, asking them questions about their builds and learning from their mistakes. And truth be told, this was and still is to this day very difficult for me because despite what you might think, knowing me through this camera on YouTube, I'm actually very introverted. I spend the majority of time here at home with my wife, my 2 kids, and my 2 dogs, and I would rather be here than just about anywhere else in the world. But I have to be honest in saying that it does pay dividends for you to spend time out and about with other people interested in this hobby, because that is the way that you grow, that is the way that you learn. Now, if you are looking for that community right now, I am doing my best to build it for you. I have a Facebook group that's called Grease's Garage. It is very simple to join. I have the link for this group down in the description below. Click on that link, answer a couple questions so that I know you're a real person and not some random Facebook bot. And inside that group, you will find hundreds of other builders who are looking for exactly the same thing you are looking for. Other chopper builders to connect with and talk to. And obviously, I'm in that group as well. So if there's something you wanted to ask me or you just wanted to chat with me a little more than you get from the comment section here, you can find me in that Grease's Garage Facebook group. And maybe between all of us in that group, you just might find that there's another chopper builder living right in your backyard wondering that same thing. Boy, I wish there was somebody around here like me that was into building choppers. Trust me, it happened. How do I know? Well, that takes us into the next story. This next lesson I learned would involve every Friday of my life for about 5 years straight. It was a commitment that I never realized I was signing up for, but would go on to dominate about half a decade of my weekly schedule. Of course, at the time when I signed up for it, it was nothing more than a conversation around a campfire with my friend Loctite, who I mentioned in that story earlier. You see, we were longtime listeners of a podcast called Riders on the Norm, hosted by Wes and Big Scott. This was a chopper podcast, and at the time, it was about the only chopper podcast that I was even aware of. This is the time where I was building that XS650 chopper, my first chopper. So this podcast about this chopper lifestyle was the highlight of my week. And when they announced that this podcast was going to be shutting down, I was devastated. And it was in the wake of this tragedy that Loctite had suggested that he, myself, and our other friend CP should take up the torch and start the next chopper podcast. Now, obviously, I was scared. I was only halfway through my very first chopper. What could I possibly have to share with the world at large about building choppers? But I thought long and hard about what Riders on the Norm had done for the community, what it did for my week and for the weeks of so many other chopper builders that were looking for that inspiration. So I put my fear to the side and I said, you know what? Let's do it. The beginning was rough, but every single Friday, the Low Life Chopper podcast would hit the airwaves, spreading the good word of choppers amongst the community. Truth be told, this garage I'm sitting in right now is actually where we recorded the first episode with the microphone looped over this beam right here, just hanging down among the three of us like we were Bruce Buffer announcing a fight. And this is the spot where it all happened. Did we know what we were getting into at the time? Absolutely not. But this brings us to our fourth lesson. Do what you are afraid of. Now, I'm not saying that you need to start a podcast like we did in order to get into this community, but maybe you're scared of going to your first chopper show on a stock bike. Or maybe there's a local chopper shop in your area and you're scared to drive down there and introduce yourself. Or maybe you've already started your first chopper build, but you're afraid to weld on the bungs to mount your gas tank, or wire your bike, or heck, maybe even welding your first hardtail. All of these things terrified me at one point in my life. And today, I don't even bat an eye at any of them. Whatever you're afraid of doing on your build right now, that's where you need to begin. Our fifth lesson today comes to us in the way of what you're seeing right here, right now. Grease's Garage, my YouTube channel. You know, I can still see that parking lot in Haverhill when I close my eyes sitting here in my garage today. As I sit next to my first ever toolbox. It's a Harbor Freight box, but it's got Snap-on tools in it now. And it feels like a whole lifetime ago, reminiscing about sitting in between the white lines of that parking lot, thinking about how 10 years changes a person. So why am I doing this? Why am I sitting here in this garage 10 years later, still feeling like a complete amateur, telling other builders how to go about solving their problems? Despite what you see here in front of you today, I once was exactly where you are right now. I know the heartbreak. I know the feeling of failure. I know what it feels like to miss a ride because you were either too broke to pay for a proper repair or too uneducated to fix it yourself. It took me 10 years of struggling, of messing things up, of believing my own excuses, or just following the wrong crowd. This YouTube channel is not about me or my bike or what I'm up to. This channel is about getting you out of that parking lot, getting you back on the road, helping you solve your problems, and hopefully skipping the struggle in the process. When I started this channel, the goal was to help 1,000 riders get their builds over the finish line. And on this day that I'm recording this video right now, Grease's Garage has helped over 100 of you do exactly that, and I'm still pushing toward that goal of 1,000. And another milestone that just so happened to take place on this very day when I'm recording is the channel has just hit 10,000 subscribers. And for that, I would like to say a massive thank you to all of you for watching, for sharing, for sending these videos to your friends. When I go on the forums and someone has asked a question and I see that someone else has already posted one of my videos in response, it lets me know that these videos really are helping, that this channel really is helping. And that's what this channel is all about. Which leads us into lesson 5, show others the way. The truth of the matter is we all struggle. And as much as I'd love to help you skip that struggle every time, I know that that's not realistic. We live in a fallen world, but God calls us to be servant leaders, to make this world a better place through service and self-sacrifice, even if you don't feel qualified to do so. When we started the Low Life Chopper podcast, I didn't feel qualified to do it. When I started this channel, I didn't feel qualified to do this. But you have to remember, God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called. Am I a master Harley mechanic? No. Am I a born-free invited builder pushing that cutting edge of fabrication? No. Do I have a fleet of motorcycles to show you every how-to under the sun? Of course not. So who am I? I am one guy in his garage doing his best, and I will do until someone better shows up. And so if you are on this journey with me, or better yet, if you are ahead of me on this journey, show others the way. This community of chopper builders really is a special one. And if we want it to stick around for generations, we need to help the people who are still there in the parking lot, who don't have the tools and don't have the knowledge, and they just need that mentor to show them the way. If this video is motivating you to step into your first project or to get back to that project that you abandoned, let me simplify your first step. You've got the energy, you've got the drive, now you need the plan. And here's the good news. I've already built it for you. Click on this video right here to learn my Grease's Garage method, the 4 F's of chopper building. And print out the free PDF guide that's linked in the description of that video so you can make a plan to win, and finish that build. Thanks for watching Grease's Garage, and I'll see you on the road.